It began not with proof, but with whispers, the kind that never fully disappear, only sink beneath the surface until the timing is right. Long before titles, palaces, and carefully managed interviews, Meghan Markle lived a life that, like many public figures, became the subject of online speculation once fame arrived. In recent years, corners of the internet have revived claims about her earliest relationships, especially one involving a man named Joe Giuliano. None of these claims have been verified by public records, and supporters strongly dispute them, but their persistence raises an uncomfortable question about how rumors are born, buried, and resurrected. According to people who claim to have known Giuliano decades ago, their relationship predated Meghan's Hollywood years and ended quietly, leaving behind more questions than answers. These accounts suggest a short-lived marriage that allegedly vanished from official narratives, though no independently confirmed documentation has ever surfaced to support this. Still, gossip thrives not on certainty, but on absence. Where details are missing, imagination rushes in. The story gained traction because it fit a familiar arc, a young woman with ambition outgrowing a modest beginning, leaving behind people who valued stability over reinvention. Critics argue that such framing unfairly punishes women for ambition, while others insist that unanswered questions invite scrutiny. What keeps this rumor alive is not evidence, but emotion. Family rejection stories resonate because they touch something universal, the fear of being deemed unsuitable, untrustworthy, or incompatible. Online commentators claim the Giuliano family was deeply traditional and uncomfortable with Meghan's aspirations, but these descriptions come from anonymous sources and second-hand retellings, not direct testimony. No interviews, no court filings, no photographs have ever confirmed the more dramatic versions of events. Yet, silence itself becomes part of the mythology. When people don't speak, observers often assume they can't, or won't, or were paid not to. That assumption fuels speculation, turning gaps into narratives. Some accounts go further, alleging sealed annulments, relocated families, and lifelong agreements of silence. These claims remain unsubstantiated and are rejected by those close to Meghan, who say her past has been distorted repeatedly to serve sensational storytelling. Still, the idea of a hidden chapter lingers because it contrasts so sharply with the public image that followed. Viewers are drawn to contrast. They want before and after stories, transformation arcs, secret origins. When a life appears polished, audiences search for rough edges beneath the shine. This is how rumor becomes content, and content becomes belief. Not because it's proven, but because it's repeated, and repetition, in the digital age, often feels like truth. The more the story circulates, the more it detaches from its uncertain origins. It stops being about what happened and becomes about what people want to believe. That is the real engine driving these claims, not documents, not witnesses, but the irresistible pull of a story that promises to reveal what fame supposedly hides.
As the rumors spread, it followed a familiar path, moving from obscure message boards into longer videos, reaction podcasts, and speculative threads that fed off one another. Each retelling added detail, not because new facts emerged, but because audiences demanded narrative clarity. Names, locations, and motives were filled in like blanks on a worksheet, even when the original sources offered none. The Giuliano family, described vaguely as private and traditional, became symbols rather than people, cast as guardians of a truth too dangerous to surface. In these stories, their silence was portrayed not as a preference for privacy, but as evidence of a hidden agreement. Yet, there is an important distinction between choosing not to speak and being unable to. Many families tied, even loosely, to public figures avoid attention precisely because attention distorts memory and invites intrusion. That nuance rarely survives online amplification. Instead, silence is reframed as confirmation, a blank screen onto which viewers project intent. What complicates the narrative further is how it intersects with broader cultural tensions. Meghan Markle has long been a polarizing figure, admired by some for challenging tradition and criticized by others for the same reason. Rumors about her past are often filtered through those pre-existing opinions. For critics, the Giuliano story fits neatly into a belief that her public persona is manufactured, that reinvention requires erasure. For supporters, the rumor exemplifies how women, especially women who rise quickly and visibly, are punished retroactively for ambition. Both sides use the same story to argue opposite conclusions, which reveals how little the details themselves actually matter. Digital storytelling rewards emotional punch over verification. A claim that a marriage ended quietly does not travel far, but a claim that it was deliberately erased spreads instantly. The idea of a family disappearing to protect a secret child triggers a visceral reaction, even when no records, photos, or first-hand accounts exist to support it. Algorithms favor intensity. Content that provokes outrage, shock, or betrayal rises faster than content that says, "We don't know." As a result, uncertainty becomes exaggerated into certainty through repetition. Each creator cites another creator, not an original source, creating the illusion of corroboration. There is also a psychological comfort in believing that fame is built on hidden compromises. It reassures audiences that success is never purely earned, that there is always a cost paid by someone else. The Giuliano narrative serves that function. It suggests that behind the polished speeches and public causes lies a trail of discarded lives. Whether true or not, the story satisfies a craving for moral balance. If someone rises high, the thinking goes, someone else must have been left behind. But when examined closely, the structure of the rumor collapses under its own weight. Claims of sealed records without legal trace, international relocations without immigration footprints, and lifelong silence without a single verified breach stretch plausibility. None of this proves the opposite either. It simply returns us to the same place where the story began, a void. And in that void, belief becomes a choice. Some choose suspicion, others choose restraint. What remains undeniable is that the story says more about the culture consuming it than the people at its center.
Over time, the rumors stopped evolving and started hardening. What began as speculation transformed into a fixed storyline, repeated so often that its lack of verification faded into the background. Viewers encountering it for the first time rarely traced it back to its origin. They heard it framed confidently, with dates, motives, and emotional conclusions already decided for them. That confidence is persuasive. It creates the impression that someone, somewhere, must have confirmed it, even when no such confirmation exists. This is how narratives gain authority without evidence, by sounding complete. The Giuliano story is now told as if it were a missing chapter torn from a book, not a loose collection of assumptions stitched together after the fact. What also fuels its longevity is the way it intersects with ideas about identity. Meghan Markle's public life has been defined by reinvention, moving from private citizen to actress, from actress to royal, from royal to global media figure. Reinvention unsettles people. It challenges the notion that identity is fixed or owed to others. Stories like this function as a corrective fantasy, suggesting that reinvention always involves deception, that starting over requires abandoning someone who stayed behind. The alleged rejection by the Giuliano family is framed as moral judgment, a signal that they saw something others missed. But this framing relies entirely on anonymous interpretations. No confirmed statements from Joe Giuliano, no public comments from his family, no legal documents have emerged to support the claims. The authority of the story comes from tone, not proof. There is also the ethical question of collateral damage. Even unverified stories affect real people. Families named in rumors are pulled into conversations they never consented to join. Hypothetical children become characters in someone else's narrative, stripped of agency and privacy. Once a rumor reaches this level, denial rarely helps. Silence is interpreted as guilt, and rebuttal is dismissed as damage control. This creates a trap where the only winning move is invisibility, something impossible when a story goes viral. Media literacy struggles in this environment. Audiences are rarely encouraged to ask what would actually be required for such claims to be true. Legal systems leave trails. Births, marriages, annulments, relocations all generate records, especially across borders. The absence of these records is not proof of a cover-up by default. It is more often proof that the event did not occur as described. Yet the mythology of sealed files and powerful erasures persists because it feels cinematic. It mirrors movies, not real bureaucracy. What is often overlooked is that ordinary breakups, short relationships, and youthful mistakes do not need to be hidden to be forgotten. Most early relationships disappear naturally, without conspiracies or agreements. The insistence that this one required extraordinary measures says more about the desire for drama than the likelihood of truth. Still, the rumor continues to circulate because it offers a sense of insider knowledge. Believing it makes the audience feel ahead of the story, as if they know what others don't. In the end, the Giuliano narrative occupies a gray zone between curiosity and accusation. It cannot be proven, but it can also not be fully erased, because it lives in repetition, not records. And repetition, once embedded in culture, becomes its own form of reality, shaping perception even when facts remain out of reach.
At this stage, the story no longer belongs to the people it names. It belongs to the audience that consumes it. That shift is subtle but powerful. Once a narrative becomes cultural property, it stops being evaluated on accuracy and starts being judged on usefulness. Does it confirm what someone already believes? Does it explain discomfort, resentment, or fascination? The Giuliano rumor persists because it offers an explanation for contradictions people think they see. It gives form to unease, even if that form is speculative. In that sense, it functions less as an allegation and more as a symbol of mistrust toward polished public identities, toward institutions, toward stories that feel curated. There is also a deeper pattern at play, one that appears whenever a woman's rise defies expectations. Stories emerge that reframe ambition as betrayal. Private decisions become moral indictments. Silence becomes suspicious. The alleged rejection by a traditional family is cast as a warning sign rather than a difference in values. This framing has historical precedent. Women who move beyond prescribed roles are often met with retroactive narratives that seek to explain their success through personal failure rather than effort or timing. Whether or not one likes Meghan Markle, this pattern is worth noticing because it repeats far beyond her. At the same time, skepticism toward powerful figures is healthy. Public personas are curated. Image management exists. Not every question is an attack. The challenge lies in separating inquiry from invention. When questions turn into fully formed stories without evidence, the line blurs. The Giuliano narrative crossed that line years ago. It stopped asking what happened and started asserting why, who was wrong, and what it supposedly reveals about character. That shift transforms curiosity into conviction, even when the foundation remains uncertain. Another reason the story lingers is its unfinished feeling. There is no definitive ending, no confirmation or denial that satisfies everyone. Open loops are addictive. They invite speculation, updates, and revisits. Each time Meghan appears in the news, the story resurfaces, reattached to a new headline. It becomes background noise that never fully fades. This is how rumors achieve longevity, by attaching themselves to relevance rather than truth. Yet, for all its spread, the story has not produced what rumors usually seek: Resolution. No documents have surfaced. No interviews have broken the silence. No independent verification has emerged. That absence does not prove concealment, but it does limit what can responsibly be claimed. What remains is interpretation layered on interpretation. For some, that is enough. For others, it is precisely why restraint matters. Ultimately, the question is not whether the rumor is interesting, but whether believing it changes anything meaningful. Does it improve understanding, or does it simply harden judgment? Does it reveal hidden systems, or does it personalize blame? These are questions each listener answers privately. The power of the story lies not in what it proves, but in how it is used. And as long as it continues to circulate without resolution, it will remain less a chapter of history and more a mirror, reflecting the assumptions of those who repeat it.
By the time a rumor survives decades, it no longer depends on evidence to breathe. It survives on repetition, emotion, and the hunger for hidden explanations. The Giuliano story sits in that space, suspended between curiosity and certainty, amplified by the modern media machine that rewards intrigue over restraint. Podcasts, reaction channels, comment threads, and algorithm-driven feeds all recycle fragments, each time smoothing rough edges until speculation sounds like narrative. What began as whispers becomes lore, and lore is harder to challenge than lies. For Meghan, this creates a permanent shadow effect. Every reinvention invites excavation. Every public success triggers a search for what must have been sacrificed to achieve it. That is the unspoken rule applied to figures who disrupt expectation. When someone rises quickly or visibly, the audience looks backward, convinced there must be a hidden cost paid by others. The Giuliano rumor offers that cost in a neat package: a family hurt, a tradition rejected, a child protected. Whether accurate or not, it satisfies an emotional logic many people already carry. But emotional logic is not historical truth. It feels right without being provable. It aligns with narrative instinct rather than documented reality. This is where responsible listening matters. Stories can be compelling without being conclusive. Silence can exist without meaning guilt. Privacy can be chosen without being sinister. When those distinctions collapse, the audience stops consuming stories and starts participating in judgment. There is also the question of harm. Rumors do not remain abstract. They attach to real names, real families, real lives. The Giulianos, whoever they are in reality, have never stepped forward to claim this story. If privacy was once their shield, repetition becomes its erosion. The same applies to imagined children, imagined motives, imagined bargains. Each retelling hardens speculation into assumed memory, leaving little room for correction. And yet, the persistence of such stories tells us something true about the moment we live in. Trust in institutions is fragile. Trust in public narratives is thinner than ever. People look for inconsistencies because they expect them. In that environment, any gap invites filling. Rumors rush in where clarity does not. The solution is not blind belief or blind dismissal, but awareness of how easily curiosity turns into certainty. In the end, the Giuliano story functions less as revelation and more as a test of how we handle ambiguity, a test of whether we demand proof or settle for plausibility, a test of whether we recognize the difference between a story that explains the world and one that simply entertains suspicion. Meghan Markle will continue to live in the public eye. New chapters will replace old ones, but this rumor will linger as long as audiences keep asking not what is true, but what feels true. And that distinction decides whether a story informs or merely consumes.
How we choose to listen determines whether culture sharpens understanding or corrodes it, slowly replacing curiosity with certainty and stories with judgment over time, always.